We now have our police department for fiscal years 2019 and 2020 for the biennial budget. And we have Chief Hensley.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to appear before you to talk about the 2019-2020 Police Department biennial budget. I brought some of my staff with me here today. I'm just the face that's doing all the talking up in front, but the real people that are getting the work done are sitting out here. First off, Captain John Gomez. He's our Support Services Bureau Captain. Also Diane McCarthy, who is my management analyst. Between the two of them, they are in charge of the budget, and they do a fantastic job. I also have Lieutenant Ron Mussman, who is currently my acting captain of the Field Operations Division, and Lieutenant Cameron Christensen, who is my Technical Services Division Commander. Up on the board is our mission statement. It's remained the same for quite some time. What it basically talks about is our primary mission, which is providing for the public safety of this community that we serve, and the fact that we cannot do it without the partnership that we have with the community. This is our organizational chart. It is accurate as to how we are broken up. We're divided up between the two different bureaus, the Field Operations Bureau and the Support Services Bureau, and all of the different ranks that fall underneath there. Core Services, our Field Operations Bureau has patrol functions, traffic, and the parking functions. My Operations Support Bureau provides investigative, such as all my detectives, communications liaison with county, records division, training division, property room, crime analysis, fiscal, the budgeting, and some other very important areas that allow the police department to function as well as it does. Support for citywide priorities. We continue to provide quality services in response to concerns about crime and the quality of life issues in the city of Daly City, and we search for long-term solutions, not just short-term, to try and only deal with the problem one time. We work to enhance parking enforcement through neighborhood parking enforcement operations, and as part of our mission statement, reducing crime and the fear of crime through the use of accurate and timely intelligence, rapid deployment, effective tactics, relentless follow-up and assessment, all of which equals the CompStat model, which we meet every single Monday morning and we talk about. We contribute to regional enforcement efforts through the San Mateo County Gang Task Force, the Vehicle Theft Task Force, narcotics interdiction activities to include the San Mateo County Narcotics Task Force, the DEA Metro Task Force, DEA San Francisco Airport, and we have agents or officers / detectives assigned to several of those organizations or to those task forces. We contribute to traffic safety missions through the use of grant funding from the California Office of Traffic Safety. The council should be aware of that the OTS, the Office of Traffic Safety, is not quite issuing grants as freely as they used to. That has definitely come down over the last couple of years. As an example, they no longer fund equipment. We used to be able to purchase traffic safety equipment through them, and we're no longer able to do that. It's primarily now DUI and other enforcement efforts are what those grants cover. We continue to seek active ongoing partnerships with our community. We do that by attending regular meetings. Both my command staff and officers attend HOA meetings throughout the city, as well as citywide events. Some of our accomplishments, 2017-2018 year. We had a really big, very successful operation called Operation Cold Day in 2000, which kind of wrapped up in 2017, resulted in 115 suspects arrested, 100 guns seized, and 50 stolen cars purchased. This was a great operation that involved federal, state, and local agencies, and what ended up being the largest operation in ATF history. More importantly, I think what it did is it delivered a message. And the message that it delivered to people that would come into our community to either purchase guns, sell guns, try and steal cars, sell narcotics, is that you never know where we're at, and you never know where we're going to be, but at some point there will be a day of reckoning. We also,
So if they're gonna do it, they're gonna do it someplace else then,
not here.
not here.
Not here. My Detective Investigations Division, my detectives are working in partnership with the Crime Lab. We never forget about our cold case homicides. We continue to actively work those cases, especially with changes in technology. And we solved the 1976 Denise Lampy murder, which those of you that remember, I do remember, occurred up at Ceremony Shopping Center in the parking lot outside of Macy's. That suspect is in custody and proceeding through the court process now. The department is using grant funds from the Bureau of State and Community Corrections to train all of our officers in crisis intervention training. 90% of the sworn officers, sworn members are now trained in CIT, and I'm hoping during this next fiscal year we'll have 100% of our officers trained. We worked with public works staff for the upgrade to our police locker room and our range facility, and also upgrades to our investigations division. We continue to work with public works on our department operations center and an upgrade to our 2 interview rooms inside the police department. We have been working for years with an outside vendor to digitize over 1 million archived documents to try and get those into our digital storage system. As you know, trying to retain all of those paper records is quite an endeavor, not to mention that that paper starts to fade away as time goes on, and there's many rules about how long we have to keep those reports. That project is almost completed, and it's been a whole lot of work by my record supervisor, Vicki Broderick, and my police record staff, who have to double check all the work to make sure it's been archived correctly and accurately. One new project we're working on is we're working with researchers from Stanford University on the Social Psychological Answers to Real-World Questions, or SPARK program. What it basically is we're working with PhD professors and students from Stanford and trying to work on identifying police officer biases and teaching officers how to recognize those biases so that we can have better, more effective, and more positive interactions with the community. So we were selected as one of the agencies by Stanford. We are working with them now. They're working with some other jurisdictions also, and the plan is to roll out a strategy that officers can use to improve community relations, and once we can come up with some ways to measure that effectiveness, that we can then share that with other jurisdictions, both here in California and even further out. We also worked with Congressman Jackie Spear, Supervisor Dave Canepa, the town of Colma, Cal Palace, Republic Services, to work on our first gun buyback event on September 9th, 2017. We are in the planning stages now to hold a follow-up event on May 12th of this year. The department continues to participate in community events, including Cops and Kids, National Night Out, Literacy Days, the PAL Golf Fundraising Tournament, Supervisor Canepa's District 5 Together event, and Pacific Islands Together. On top of all of that, we work with community resources and other corporations here, such as Republic Services, Target, community partners, as well as Daly City Police Athletic League, which over the last year and a few months, we've donated well over $30,000 to community youth, sports programs, and community events that involve the youth here. Next, I'm going to talk about our significant crime reduction as one of our most proud accomplishments. So you can see by the numbers there, we have had significant decreases in almost every crime, except for an increase in rape and sexual assaults. We'll continue to work on that to try and decrease that, just like we did with everything else, but those are marked decreases, and I don't know that all the jurisdictions around us could share that same good news. We accomplished that through targeted enforcement operations, and the fact that our continued relationship with our community, and the fact that they call us when they see something going on. Our goals and objectives for 2019-2020. Continue to provide effective visible neighborhood patrols, timely response to priority 1 calls, and complete field investigations. On our last budget, we had set a goal for our priority 1 response times to be 6 minutes or less. I'm happy to sit before you today and say that for 2017, we met that goal, and we averaged 5 minutes and 38 seconds a response. And so far this year for 2018, we are averaging 4 minutes and 14 seconds a response to those priority 1 calls. So that's a great job by my patrol division and all of my officers. Continue to conduct high-quality, objective investigations to successfully identify offenders and prosecute crimes against persons or property, which is meeting our main mission here, which is to provide for public safety. My investigations division has a motto that says, "No one escapes." And they live that every day and will go as far as they need to track down somebody that committed a crime in Daly City. We attempt to, or another goal is to prevent traffic collisions through enforcement, education, and engineering. We continue to work with our city engineering department to try and develop long-term strategies to reduce collisions. This is a particularly challenging goal for us based on, as Director Fuller was talking about earlier, that we have so many pedestrians in the city, and it's very difficult to try and reduce the vehicle pedestrian collisions, but we're actively working on it all the time. We also are attempting to provide effective record keeping for both internal and external customers. That is a changing target, especially based on new legislation that's passed lately or recently, such as the Racial and Identity Profiling Act, which in 2020 is going to require all law enforcement agencies in the state to have to report up to 20 different pieces of data for every citizen contact. So every traffic stop, every citizen contact, we are going to have to log 20 pieces of data and report those to the state. So record keeping demands continue to increase. Provide competent and efficient handling of property and evidence, which is a very tedious and challenging process because of the amount of property that we seize and the stringent guidelines with when we can return it. We continue to have 6 frozen officer positions with looking at some additional frozen positions as part of our budget reduction proposal. We also continue to have 1 police records clerk frozen. Revenue for the police protection services continues to trend down. Not much we can do about that. That has to do with the Cow Palace and their success in attracting events. The cost for Star Vista, which is a safe and sobering facility, has increased by almost $13,000. Although that has gone up in the brighter light, that actually saves us booking fees. We don't have to drive somebody down to Redwood City and book them in, which also takes an officer off the street for that amount of time. And more importantly, it gets people that have perhaps an addiction issue resources much faster than they would if they were going down to jail. Crime lab costs are rapidly increasing due to mandated testing of all sexual assault kits, drug identification, and the collection and submission of DNA samples. We put in there as an example, routine DNA analysis is almost $500 an hour. Crossing guard rates in the contractual services budget have increased and continue to increase each year. The numbers are there for you. I think the city manager is working on a plan to possibly address that, which will absolutely help us out in our budget. We're also still...
I should add at this point, for the benefit of the entire council, we did have a meeting with the Jefferson Elementary School District Committee and talked about the increasing costs for school crossing guards and the need to share in that responsibility because while we have been historically supportive of providing crossing guards. It is not a city responsibility to provide crossing guards. We did a survey of the cities in San Mateo County and determined that only Redwood City was providing crossing guard services. And so in speaking with the superintendent and the council or the school board members who were present at the meeting where we had this conversation, we raised the issue of potentially sharing the annual cost of the contract, which is growing upwards to $200,000 a year for approximately, I believe it is 16 locations in the city. And also looking at those 16 locations and identifying if there are higher priority locations where we would want to continue to have uniformed crossing guards by contract, and then potentially to work with the school district to see if there are PTA members who would be willing to assist with crossing guard activities, and having the police department work with some of the middle school students to provide crossing guard services as well, that could help to reduce the overall cost for this contract for both the school district as well as the city.
And lastly,
And recognizing that we have reduced in this budget request or proposal to you that annual contract by 50%. And what we're proposing is that we will make up the difference either in having the school district pick up the other half of the contract, and/or reducing the number of locations that would lower that contract amount to a level that the city and the school district could afford to share that cost in an equitable manner.
thank you. Lastly, due to continuing military conflicts overseas, the cost of ammunition continues to increase, and it's a longer and longer lag time before we can receive it. Lastly, technology costs continue to rise significantly. This is no surprise to anybody here. We're relying more and more on technology, and there's always the ongoing maintenance costs as well as upgrades that come all the time. Some of the new software that we have purchased and we're finding success is our IA Pro, which is software to manage our complaint system so that we know when we have an employee that needs some additional attention or training, whereas we might not have caught that before. Blue Archer software, which allows us to input any graffiti that we find in the city. It's also input by other agencies like San Francisco, and it helps us to identify who the people are responsible for the tags and go after them for prosecution. And Lexipol, which is our policy management software, and it provides daily training bulletins for officers so that we know they're up to date as they should be. And most recently, software called Lefta that we purchased, which will take and get rid of all of the paper we have with our field training program and make those all electronic records. Next is our budget summary by category. I can tell you that we work every day to try and figure out where we can cut costs, what we can look at. Is there a better way out there? Is there a better method? Is there a better tool? So we're aware of it and we're working at it all of the time. Budget summary by fund. First is up to general fund. The second is our traffic safety fund. Third one, traffic enforcement, is actually our red light camera program. And last, grants, which is mainly our California Office of Traffic Safety. And as I mentioned earlier, those grants are becoming more difficult to get all the time. Last is the general fund. And I am happy to answer any questions the council might have.
Do any of my colleagues at this moment have any questions or comments?
I do. Thank you, Chief, for your presentation. I'm going to start at the back end first, and that's the budget summary by category. I notice in fiscal year 2019, there's a decrease of 10 job slots.
Correct. So that's counting the 6 frozen officers that we have now.
And the
And
one
the
records?
proposed 2 sergeants and 2 officers to meet the budget reduction for the next 2 fiscal years. So if all of that is approved, that would be 10.
Okay, so we're going to lose 2 sergeants and
And 2 officers. We're going to freeze.
we're going to
those
freeze. Okay. I see the revenue as we bring in revenue in the police department. I guess this is mostly through fines and fees and through your parking assistance. Any thoughts on increasing the force for public parking assistance?
Yes, most of the revenue is coming from the parking enforcement, it's roughly around 3 million per year. So out of the 4.5, approximately 3 million is from the parking citation.
Okay, and other than police officers, I think the parking assistance brings in some of that revenue. I'm just wondering, I mean, because it seems like it's a low way, you could take some of the work off the police officers to do more important things, but the parking assistance, I think, is a very crucial part to revenue generating for our city.
Well, our traffic assistants, our parking assistants do generate the majority of that revenue.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that when our officers are out on patrol, if they identify violations, they will stop and they will cite individual violators. But the bulk of that revenue is brought in by the traffic assistants who are out every single day monitoring for compliance with our street sweeping signs,
Right.
parking meters, and the like, and any other posted parking restrictions.
Oh, I get it. I mean, I'm just putting the plug to get some more. All right. I wrote them all down. Oh, okay. Thank you for the reaching out to the school district. I think that was, I mean, we shouldn't bear the brunt of everything. Just like on our taxes, we only get a certain portion, and the state depends on us to provide all the services with such a reduced rate. So I really enjoyed hearing that.
One of the things we did mention in that conversation is the fact that if you go to any of the elementary schools throughout Daly City, probably the majority of students are actually dropped off and picked up by parents. So they're not really walking across the streets. Their parents, usually what happens is they run across the street and they don't even use the crosswalks, which is a bigger issue. When we've had accidents, it's generally not that they've been walking in the crosswalk, it's that they've run across the street without supervision. So the need for a partnership with the school district to ensure the safety of students is absolutely necessary, and I believe that that falls in line with sharing the costs for crossing guards.
Excellent, excellent point, because I know the Policita School, which I live right across the street from, they have a pickup zone that they have specifically to pick up the kids. But they still double park down the whole street. The kids come out of school, they run across the street to go across the street rather than go pickup zone. So I think all that will come into play. For my colleagues on the council, I have to agree with the chief in the change of technology. We used to be in the age of industry, but now for being police, the use of technology is very crucial and important because we depend on that to get the information we need at those critical moments, and how fast you get that information is very crucial. I just wanted to make that comment. My last comment is, all through this, I didn't see anything on the officers' well-being. Do we have some sort of peer counseling group so that officers, besides the Spark through Stanford study as to police biasness, but individual officers, they're human beings as well, and do they have a mechanism who they can turn to for maybe counseling by their peers up to a certain point where it's mandated reporting, but they know, hey, can't share that information. If you share that with me, I have to report it. But sometimes they just need to talk, and I'm just wondering if we have some sort of behavioral science unit or peer counseling for our individual officers.
We have no formal unit for that. Most certainly, the supervisors are very aware of the officers that work for them. They know and they can detect when there's a change in behavior that might require kind of an offline conversation.
Good.
On top of that, all of our employees are very aware of the city's employee assistance program. And I know for sure that we have had employees take advantage of that free service.
That's great to hear. And but sometimes I think officers like to talk with their fellow peers. You can go outside to maybe employee assistance. Well, you don't understand me. And, it's just a thought, and just bring it up. And it's a good program, and I think it would benefit our officers as well, knowing that they should talk to one another up to a certain point. And thank you for the murder investigation and ceremony. Folks need to know that anytime there's a 187, that there is no statute of limitations. Eventually, you will get caught, even if it takes 40 years. But thank you for a job well done by your officers and being assigned to the various task forces, because having an officer assigned to the task force takes away from your staff when they're assigned to the task force, but in return, they come back with valuable training that they can impart to their fellow officers. So that's my comment. Thank you so much, Chief.
Thank you. Any more questions or
I have a
comments?
question.
Councilmember
Back to
Christensen.
page 10, which is the accomplishments and the significant crime reduction. With that more than doubling the number of rapes, have there been successful investigations and arrests?
I would offer up, without researching that, the
Uh-huh.
majority of those led to in custodies. The majority of those where the
Excellent.
suspect was identified, arrested, and being prosecuted.
And are there any sort of locations that are attached to those in any way?
No.
Or it's kind
It's
of
random.
everywhere?
It's random.
Because when someone looks at that, they go, well, how can I protect myself? That's the first thing you're going to think. So do you have any things that you would like to share with the public and those present here this evening on how to protect themselves?
Well, first off, what I would say is that when you look at that number, that is not a number of stranger sexual assaults. I would offer up that probably the majority of those are familial, or there was some relationship prior, whether it be a friend or something else, but there was some relationship there. This was not, for the most part, those are not stranger sexual assaults. How somebody can protect themselves in that environment, I don't know that I have the answer for that. What I do think is that with all the attention that is out there in the media right now, I think that is contributing to the increase that we're seeing, and I think other agencies would say the same thing.
And I would think especially the kind of rapes that are with someone that you know, that people would feel more empowered to report those.
They do, and we encourage that. That at times is a struggle also, but we absolutely encourage people to report.
Great, thank you.
Any more comments or questions?
Yeah, I have some.
Okay. Vice Mayor.
Chief, if you were to analyze another category of, let's say, gang crimes, how would you say we're doing with respect to prosecuting those?
I would say the Daly City Police Department does a very good job of staying on top of gang issues. Certainly, we have gang members that live in our city, but unlike other cities, we don't see our gang members hanging out on street corners or anything like that. It's hidden away for good reason. When we know that we have a gang member, we will do all that we can to make that person aware that we know who they are, we know where they live, and we will try and keep that pressure on them so that if there is going to be any gang activity, it will not be in Daly City. We don't tolerate it.
Could you generalize and say there's been a decrease in gang activity, or?
I would say in my 24 years here, there's been a significant decrease
Okay.
compared to 24 years ago. And I would say we've just done the officers and my command staff have done a very good job of keeping it that way.
Great, great. I had a question. When we have officers that are participating in task forces, how is the cost of that? Is that shared? How are we budgeting for that?
So it depends on which one. So for the county positions, the majority of the salary is reimbursed by the county, as well as the overtime costs. For the federal positions, which are two officers we have assigned to the DEA task forces, we are only able to get reimbursement for the overtime. On the other side of that, those two positions bring in a significant amount of asset forfeiture as part of their enforcement process. So the city does realize quite a benefit to having them there.
Okay. Do we have any kind of a robust neighborhood crime watch program? Is that something that your department is trying to get together? What's the state of our crime watch programs?
I think our bigger role in neighborhood watch or crime watch in a certain area is the fact that we attend all those homeowners meetings. So we try and attend those every single month, and we always try and get the officer who's assigned to that area, as well as the supervisor there, that can talk about the problems that are occurring and trying to get neighbors to get to know each other, which is really the core of what a neighborhood association is. It's getting to know your neighbor and having neighbors look out for each other. When we do get approached about a certain area wanting to adopt a formal neighborhood watch program, Officer Lee Magalong is kind of our expert for that, and we will put them in touch with Lee, and Lee will walk that group through the process to formally get a neighborhood watch association in place. But again, I think more importantly, it's the fact that we enjoy really positive relationships with the community here. They have my cell number, they have cell numbers of many officers, and I think that constant open communication is just as effective as a formal neighborhood watch association.
Okay. And then in talking about the police force and the diversity of our force, I'm assuming you have different language interpretive services that you offer for people who don't speak fluent English?
We do.
What do you have? What various languages do you have?
Off the top of my head, and maybe somebody will wave at me if I miss a couple. For sure, we have Spanish, Tagalog, Cantonese, Mandarin, Russian.
Oh.
Am I missing any? I'm sure I'm missing more. On top of that, we have access, all the police officers have access to a language line, which they can call from their cell phone and communicate with somebody on the other line if it's one of the languages we don't speak. But our first option is always in-house if we have an officer who can speak whatever the language is. If not, we'll reach out to surrounding agencies. SFPD, San Francisco Police Department is great about sending somebody over who's working that might speak that language, or maybe one of the other officers in the San Mateo County jurisdiction. If all of those fail, we always have the language line available to us.
I just want to make a comment. San Francisco would gladly send folks over because they get paid for it.
That is true.
One of the issues I remember the grand jury had made a recommendation was on the use of body cams. And so where are we with that?
I think the city manager would agree with me that at some point we will find a way to fund body cams. Body cameras are very, very expensive. Not so much the purchase, although the purchase of 100 and something cameras is quite significant, but it's those ongoing costs. It's who is going to every day organize all of those downloads that we put into a server. Who's going to manage the server? How are we going to expand that server? Because we have to retain that footage for 1 year or longer if it's a case that's going through the courts. So up to this point, it's been cost prohibitive for us to get into a body cam program, although I am hopeful that by the time I leave, this department that we will have body cameras.
How much do you think it's gonna take to get that done?
It's probably $500,000 just to get the program started. And that doesn't include the cost of potentially having to hire somebody to manage the program because of the size of our agency. So at minimum, $500,000.
And then it would be plus personnel.
Plus personnel, plus ongoing costs such as
That's
server
at
and
least
everything
150,
else.
200 right there,
Right.
yeah. That's probably another $200,000 right there.
Very expensive.
What is happening with the Explorer program?
We have a very robust Explorer program. We are usually maxed out on the number that we're allowed to have, or that we had kind of set our number. I don't know if it's 20 or what it is, 20 kids. Our Explorers meet regularly. They go to training regularly. As an example, in fact, I just signed a memo today that our Explorers will be competing in the California Highway Patrol Challenge up in West Sacramento in about 2 weeks. And they do those trainings throughout the year. I think as an evidence of the success of our program is we have a couple of officers that work for our department that were Explorers, and officers that are working for other departments who are Explorers. Probably the example that jumps out the quickest is Officer Bruce Perdomo. So Bruce Perdomo started as a young boy in our Explorer program, worked his way up to a lieutenant, if I recall correctly, in the Explorer program. We hired him on as an officer, and he's now a K-9 officer for us, as well as a Jefferson High School graduate. So he is one of the many success stories out there, and there's other officers that don't work for our department, but work in other police departments in this county and outside the county.
I thought retired Chief McLean was one of those examples.
I believe he was. I believe he was.
Wow.
Retired Police Chief Gary McLean was an explorer and went all the way up through the police department to become chief, so.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Welcome.
All right. Any more questions? The two questions I asked were asked by Council Member Sylvester and Council Member Christensen. And so I do want to say that was a lengthy list of accomplishments. Thank you to DCPD for the whole department for your hard work and keeping the public safe. One thing I want to mention is I like to see that you are incorporating ways to enhance the department, even in the partnership with Stanford. And I see that's something that could possibly be a model in the future, given how large our city is and also how diverse our city is. And so I think more education and more tools that our police officers have in their hands is really great. So thank you again for all the hard work that each and every one of you do for our city.
Thank you.
Any more?
I think that this is it. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So if we might, but just before we adjourn, so I want to review what the next steps are for the budget. And that is that on Monday, we will have another special budget study session prior to the council meeting on Monday. It is our intent at that time to solicit from the council whatever additional input that you have for us and direction, so that we then can go away and finalize all the details of the budget, so that we will be prepared to come back to you next month with any revisions that are necessary for final review and ultimately for final approval of the fiscal year 19 and 20 budget. So we will be prepared. I know that both Lawrence and I have been taking notes throughout these sessions, so there are some follow-up items and information that you have requested, and we will come back on Monday with responses to those follow-ups and provide you with that additional information and whatever other information that you would like from us at that point in time. But then it is our hope that we'll be able to move forward and make all the final changes over the next few weeks, so that in May that we can have a final draft proposal for you to review. It does take the staff in finance quite a bit of time to make whatever changes on the budget and to prepare all the documents for you for final review. In addition, we will be scheduling, I know that staff have been trying to schedule a meeting with our water committee because we will be needing to meet with the water committee to discuss water and sanitation rates going forward and incorporate the information from our review of the water fund and the sanitation fund in the final budget. So we're trying to get that meeting scheduled and have the water committee review all the details from our water rate analysis and then come back to the council with a recommendation on how we're going to address some of the capital needs for water and sanitation that go beyond just what we have funded to date. So that'll be the last piece of the budget proposal going forward that we will want to get ready in the next several weeks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Martell. Appreciate that, and we know what the next steps are. I do ask my colleagues, as we went over our very first budget meeting, there were priorities that were set around what areas we feel are important, and so if we can look at that again and make sure on Monday that we identify what we do feel moving forward. So thank you very much. A motion to adjourn?
To adjourn.
Okay, adjourned. Thank you very much.